Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett's Allan. How's it going, man?
Ben, Happy New Year's, Merry late Christmas, I guess, and Happy New Year's to everyone who is listening. Hope everyone's was just as enjoyable as mine was. I was able to get out of town, went to the beach. I mean, my friends were like, "Yeah, it's 39 degrees, but we're going to go to the beach anyways," and it was great. So I'm also, at the beach as well, which means the acoustics are a little bit off. So I apologize in advance for that. But Ben, what did you do for New Year's?
I just got back from Nashville, so I was visiting my family for a few days, so that was really nice. Stayed up till 11:30, almost made it all the way to midnight, but I'm an old, washed up dad now. I can't do it. Can't go that late anymore.
Yeah, you're soft. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
well, the difference though is that you have a child, and that largely makes a major difference, I believe, in your sleep schedule. So I will give you credit on that one. Um, Ratings and reviews. Where are we on that?
We did not have a great week. No improvement on either side,
No
which
Christmas presents.
yeah, I can understand like it's a busy week. Everybody's probably with their family actually doing the important things rather than rating and review. So we'll give you a pass. But next week you're back at work, you're back at school, you're back in your normal routine. No reason not to give us a rating or review.
It's all right. We'll let it slide. We'll let it slide. We've been very lenient on coming down hard on that. So, but regardless, if everyone could do that, that'd be great. Ratings and reviews, 5-star, and comment as well as Apple Podcast and Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube as well. Ben, we have two different topics to talk about today.
Sure.
We're going to talk about the a little bit like a unique, somewhat
Mhm.
sort of affiliation with Oregon State and Washington State to the West Coast Conference, at least temporarily, and then we'll talk about some international additions, some big time additions that could change the NCAA quite a bit. Let's start though with Washington State and Oregon State temporarily, at least on what they call it as a 2-year affiliate deal
Mhm.
heading to the West Coast Conference on a 2-year deal. Basically, this saying, 10 of their athletic programs between men and women will be part of the championship fall seasons for the West Coast Conference. So that includes cross country, does not include track and field, especially because West Coast Conference doesn't sponsor track and field. There is no track and field championship
Yeah.
for the WCC. So it looks like that's the temporary solution. It will almost definitely not be the long term solution, at least not for the entirety of their athletic program, because they also don't have any football, right? So it seems like the football issue there is maybe still up in play. But what were your first thoughts when you saw that?
I thought it made a lot of sense. I think the West Coast Conference, when you, at least from a cross country perspective, and I don't know as much from a other sport perspective, very solid programs, obviously, and bring in Washington State and Oregon State on the women's side, at least for cross country. You're bringing in some solid programs. I think it's a solid match, especially considering the circumstances that Washington State and Oregon State find themselves in. I think the WCC, I think, was probably happy to have them, and I think Washington State and Oregon State just needed a home. So I think it's a win-win for both sides. It's obviously temporary, but I think there are long-term gains that could be had for both of these sides.
For Oregon State, I love this for the women.
Yeah,
This is great. I
perfect.
mean, they are going to be the clear top dogs of that West Coast Conference. Even with losing some, they should still be viewed as contenders for the conference title this upcoming fall in 2024. Gonzaga has run well as of late. Portland has run well as of late. San Francisco, they've at
Yep.
least proven that they can be competitive, albeit under a different coaching staff. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But it's not only just such a perfect alignment, but now the Oregon State women get to join a West Coast Conference that doesn't have BYU. And
Yeah.
it's such a perfect alignment in terms of that. So if I'm the Oregon State women, I'm thrilled. And on the Washington State men, it's going to be a little interesting. Washington State men and Washington State women, I don't know if this is like a thing where I think it's Portland and Gonzaga are like pretty clearly a step above them right
Yep.
now. And it'll be interesting to see, how do these different field sizes, the Pac-12 is just an overwhelming conference for, well, some of these
Both.
programs, probably the
Yeah.
bottom half of the Pac-12. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens there. Do you, as we look down, we get to 2 years and this 2-year deal expires basically. Is there like a realistic world? Like, how likely do you believe it is that Washington State and Oregon State eventually just stay in the West Coast Conference long term while the football is maybe like a more independent structure or separately joined elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't see that as being very likely, mostly because I think they're going to try to figure out a way to fill the Pac-12 conference again. You have that branding, you have that prestige. Whether it's a reverse merger of like the WAC or something, where like the WAC or WAC just becomes like controls the Pac-12 and effectively is the Pac-12. Maybe they just do something like that. But I think that brand is too valuable to just go to the wayside. And I think some conference or some teams are going to try to figure out a way to utilize that. So ultimately, I don't think it's super likely that they stay in the West Coast Conference just because I think they'll want to keep all their sports under one bucket and they can't do that there. That said, I think if they do keep the sports separate, I think this is probably the most logical landing spot if that is what happens. I just don't see that really happening, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I can see that, and I don't know. I just find it so hard to believe that they would refill the Pac-12. Like, I just don't know. Like, at that point, the WAC is like, wait, wait, wait. So we're gonna give up all of our branding because you guys fell apart, but we're fine. So, like,
But
like, do you see
I
what do
mean,
you
but
see
there's
that?
that prestige, there's that history. I think
What prestige?
they were a
Who's
Power
who's
Five at
there?
one point, at least. I like you can't ever say that about any other conference.
Okay, okay, but Ben, that's like saying, like, well, I was a billionaire. I mean, I've been broke since then, but like, I was a billionaire, and I was like, okay, but who cares? Like, it
Yeah,
doesn't. I just don't see like what the draw would be for anyone to join this conference unless you're like really itching to try something different and new and be innovative. But like, I don't know how you look at what Oregon State and Washington State have done, just as athletic programs have been like, well, they've handled, they've been able to respond quickly to this, I see, but they haven't. And so I think the West Coast Conference, I think something like that is doable. I could see them doing this with the Mountain West Conference. And because it's also more encompassing with a lot more sports
sure.
like track and field, West Coast Conference doesn't have that. But I could see them go to the Mountain West being like, hey, can you take all of our other sports and then
Yeah.
can we maybe we'll do independent for football. I could see something like that happening.
Yeah, I think the Mountain West was when you're talking about maybe the West Coast Conference not being a perfect fit for the Washington State teams. I think Mountain West would have been a slightly better move for them in terms of just competition level. They could possibly pick up a point or two, some solid programs, but not overwhelming. But at the end of the day, like this is pretty much a very similar situation that Washington State's going from the Pac-12 to the West Coast Conference in terms of like just teams that are a clear echelon ahead of them, and then they're kind of fighting with the rest. They need to improve as a pro on both sides to the point where they can compete with some of those teams just to be nationally relevant. Whereas like Oregon State is already there, so I think that transition will be a little bit more seamless.
Yeah, but I mean, I think even like men and women, men's side at least. Like, I think the difference is that it's a very top heavy and then
Yes,
significant drop off. And
sure,
Washington State just sits in the middle. Whereas the Pac-12, it's like, well, there's 4 or 5 really good teams, and then
yeah,
there's 4 or 5 maybe not so great teams, and then they are just stuck in the middle as well, at least historically speaking.
sure.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't. I think it's a fine move. I think you're right. I think it makes sense. But um, Oregon State, look out. That could be really really important, especially from Colas scenario. If Gonzaga and Portland, if they start doing some things, they could be interesting.
I think I'm gonna need a refreshers course come fall, like October time when we're looking at these cross country conference championships. I'm like, all right, who's in what conference at this point? Because I mean, you think about all the changes that have happened. Like we're gonna have just totally different title races than we ever have. Like more teams, more competitive teams just all over the place. I mean, conference, we've talked about this before, but conference weekend is just going to be, I think, that much more interesting for the years to come.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited because it consolidates the coverage to like
Oh
fewer
yeah,
meets. That's
absolutely.
just like it's just for me. I'm like, wait, one less conference, awesome, love that. I'm a big fan of that. So less previews, that's for sure. But um, yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. But let's move over and talk about some of the international additions, some of the international recruiting had, a big, I guess, transfer market. I don't know if it was a transfer market article, but a big article on that on the site last week. Subscribers can go read that. Ben, where do you want to start on some of these international additions? And actually, before you start, real quick, I should just note that these are signings that have all been announced by their respective athletic departments. It is not clear to me whether or not that also means that their visas have been approved. We are going to assume, for the sake of conversation, that they have, but that's also not necessarily guaranteed. You would assume that they
Mhm.
are, not guaranteed, but I'm throwing it out there. So because I've heard, athletes get recruited before overseas, and then it's like, oh well, their visa never went through. And I was like, well, if you're an athletic department, why would you then why would you report that? But that's all. That's my neither here nor there. So
Fair enough. All right, let's start with the Alabama men, and then we can transition to Alabama women. But on the men's side, they signed Allan Kiplagat and Dennis Kipruto. Um, Kiplagat comes in with an 8:41 PR in the steeplechase. I mean, excellent PR, obviously indicative of some good fitness there. And then Kipruto comes in with a half marathon PR of 60 minutes and 51 seconds. We haven't been able to, I think, verify this, but that's what Alabama is saying he's able to run, which is truly breathtaking if that's the case. I mean, you could probably count on one hand or maybe two the amount of guys in the NCAA that can run under 61 minutes in the half marathon right now. I would probably say one hand. So if he can translate that to the shorter distances, he is going to be quite dangerous on the grass and on the track. And then Kiplagat obviously gives them some great potential on the track side in that steeplechase. But if he, like I said, if he can be just as good on the grass, you have a quite potent quartet of Alabama runners next year.
yeah, so was it Kipruto?
Yes.
I do want to say that I think, find what it was. I want to say it was in France somewhere. I don't know that for sure. I'd have to go check that again, or at least I was like trying to find something specific to him. Um, 60-51 is insane. However, how does that translate?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking now at 8K, 10K distances that are half the distance of a half marathon. So like it's just a very different like aerobic hit. Like you're basically consolidating a lot of like your, just I don't know, aerobic fitness to only a shorter period of time, obviously. And then of course the was it Kiplagat with 8:41 PR there in the steeplechase. Um, let's say that everything works out and each of these guys are as good as maybe that their times suggest that they are on the grass. Then you have Victor Kiprop, Hillary Cherio, uh, Kipruto, and Kiplagat as like a new big four.
Hmm.
And suddenly Alabama's big three is no longer. It's now a big four. And on paper, that's probably a podium team. But the reality of seeing like, well, let's see if they can actually perform well on the national stage is it's just such an odd dynamic because you could say that like they probably are one of the top five most talented teams in terms of their scoring group coming into next year, maybe just top 10 if you want to be, lax about it. Um, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens because the talent's there. They have one more year of Kiprop and Cherio, but can they deliver on like the home run hit that they may have in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if you're running under 61 minutes in the half marathon, that's like sub 440 mile pace. And so that's like putting you at like 28, 30, 10K just off of running the same exact pace. So
Right.
I mean, he's going to be a sub 28 guy, no problem. And like I mean, dare I say, a little bit faster than that. He should be arguably their number one guy next year. I think. I don't think that's a hot take necessarily. Whether what we see out of Kiplagat in cross country, that remains to be seen. But he doesn't have to be like setting the world on fire if you have those three guys ahead of him of Kipruto, Kiprop and Chariot. Like he can just be a very solid fourth runner, and Alabama's traditionally been able to at least put the pieces together to get one guy in like that top 150, 175. I mean, that's enough for easily a top 10 finish.
Yeah, and like they'll find someone. Like they will
Yeah,
have a fifth guy. I actually think they're going to have a better back end situation if those are their four scorers.
right.
Then I think they'll be more than fine in finding a fifth, like a capable fifth, like
Yeah.
maybe a top 135th. I think it's very doable, and so that'll be interesting to see. Kiplagat, going back to him and that steeplechase
Mhm.
PR, this is a very, very important PR to monitor because the SEC didn't send a single person
Yeah.
to the national championships last year in the steeplechase, which is a wild stat. Like you would think that they
They just
would.
have not been good. Like if you look at the SEC traditionally, it's just never been a good
Not on the
steeplechase.
men's side. The
Yeah,
women's
on the
side has
men's
been
side,
pretty
you're right.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the men's side. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at this. You're like, they have to be better. And what's even more important to realize is that Victor Kibiego, who we've already spoken about,
Mhm.
steeplechase superstar going to Texas A&M, it looked like he was at least going to be just winning SEC titles in the steeplechase,
Walking easily.
walking there. Now it looks like it's yes. Is he still the heavy favorite? Yes. But Kiplagat can at least seemingly, assuming that this time is what we think it is, be competitive with him and make it work for him. And now all of a sudden, the SEC steeplechase is a little bit more competitive than maybe we thought it was.
Absolutely, yeah. A huge step forward for Alabama, and they always pull the rabbit out of the hat. I feel like this time of the year with these international recruits, and they've done it again. It looks like be super interesting to watch them whenever they come over. Let's go to the women's side for the Crimson Tide, though. They signed Brenda Tuwei. I'm going to go with
Sure.
that pronunciation. She comes in with a 10K road PR of 31:20. She's run under 32 minutes several times on the roads in the 10K. I looked at for a track PR, and I think it was like 34 minutes. So I'm not
Okay.
sure if
I
that
think you're right. Yeah.
a little like disconcerting that there's that big of a gap there, but I truthfully don't know how often she's really run on the track. With that said, if she can be more like if she's more like that 31:20, and we saw this with her new teammate Doris Cherup, where she ran some really fast. What was it, 14:50 something in the 5K?
14, 40, 46, I want to say. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, something like
yeah,
that.
something ridiculous, and that was proved to be a accurate representation, pretty much, of what she could be. She was great this past fall. So, I mean, if they're bringing in someone who's at least close to what Doris Cherub is, they have a absolute stud on their hands. And with Cherub and Olamamwe, boy, they're going to be. I mean, this. I feel like this is as close as we've seen to what that Alabama top trio had a few years ago, and maybe even better.
I think it's going to be better. I mean, we're looking at Hilda Alamawe now with Chirop. It's easily the best 1-2 punch in the
Yeah.
NCAA right now, on the grass at least. It's not even close, honestly. You just kind of look at what they do, and you're like, I mean, they're aerobically dominant, and like so, one of them is going to win a national title this year, probably in the 10K. If you had to ask me,
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to happen there. But man, I mean, that is I mean, if 31:20 on the roads, yes, on the roads, we don't know what the course is like. It's a very tricky thing to gauge. But for perspective, the collegiate record in the 10K is 31:18. Like, it is so absurd. And I would look at this originally and think, oh well, it's a road time. Like, how much
Yeah.
stock are we really going to put into this? But she's done it four times. There's been three other instances where she's gone under 32 minutes on the roads in the 10K. And oh, by the way, Doris Cherop has said that this is an accurate representation, or at least somewhat. So I don't. It might be like historic top three next fall because by that point, Chewy's gone, which she already is.
Yep.
Bobby will probably be gone. Margzic will be gone. I don't know who else would be there.
Yeah, I mean, 3 in the top 10 seems very, very likely if she turns out to be
Would
who we
you
think
put
she
money
is.
on that?
No, just because there's too much going on,
Would
like,
you okay, would you put okay, would you put money on it? Would you hold or would you bet that they would finish
fade
out
it.
one of them? Would
Yeah,
you fade it?
no,
Yeah.
I would hold. I would hold because I
Okay.
think it's I don't feel I mean, there's just I mean, Olamame and Cherub I feel confident in. But again, injuries could happen, whatever could happen. Like, they could have a bad race and they could fall out the top 10. And then with, uh, Tuwei, like, we just haven't seen her, and so to just,
Right.
like, bet that she's gonna be top 10, she clearly looks like she has the credentials to do it, so I'm not gonna bet against it, but I just that's there's too many variables there.
At what like where like was it would it be top 10, top 15, top 20?
Yeah.
Like what's the bar where you go, "You know what? Like my son's college like fund is not that important. Like I
Yeah.
can put money on this."
Well, it's funny, I was thinking it a slightly different way, but yeah, I think, like, top 25, I would feel pretty comfortable, like, because
Okay.
I think that's even if, like, their top 2 of Omame and Sharap don't have great days, they should still be top 25, and then
Yeah.
top 25 seems reasonable for someone of Two-Ways talent. I was kinda thinking about it, was like, what are the odds you'd have to give me to go, like, top 10 like, for top 10? I feel like
Okay.
if you gave me, like, plus 300, I'd be like, "Yeah, I think I'd feel comfortable with that."
Really? You would do plus 300? I would need a little
Yeah.
bit more, I think.
No, I honestly feel like I mean, that I can triple my money, like, I think I'd do that.
Yeah, when you say it like that, I mean, some yeah, I mean, okay, yeah,
We're gonna become a betting or make this into a betting
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. I don't even bet. I don't even like. I don't even. I just like the concept of it. Don't even bet. Anyways, okay, let's move on. Gilbert Rono to Texas A&M. He comes in with times of 148 and 342. I was able to verify the 342. Was not able to verify the 148. Those times were apparently run at altitude. Ben, thoughts?
I'm just seeing the altitude. Oh my. I mean, perfect combination, obviously, with Coach Paul Airing. This is a match made in heaven in terms of program, coaching staff, athlete. I mean, he's going to be dangerous. It just 2 years ago, I think I would have got a lot more excited about these like times coming in, but like with the amount of men that have run in this range, it's just not as exciting. Again, like maybe you take a second or like maybe it's 140 like 7 or like 340 after altitude, or I mean, obviously depending on how high or whatever. But I think he's going to be someone who could be in the national picture right away, but I think he's probably someone in the next year or 2 that we're gonna kinda wait on a little bit before he becomes a real force.
And I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. I think he's really important to Texas. If I don't know if he's joining this winter, I think he is. I don't know that for a fact, but if he is joining this winter, um, then you're
Oh,
looking at a
DMR.
DMR. Yeah, Sam Whitmarsh, himself, and then who else? Am I Eric Caceres,
Caceres.
right?
Yeah.
Caceres, and like they ran 929 last year.
Mhm.
Like they were competitive, right? And so I think you kind of give them a little bit of like a spark, get him someone who can really be key off of the 1200 leg, which seems to be like a sweet spot for him theoretically.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, it'd be great. I mean, how many times have we seen Paul Irang develop top youngsters from Kenya over 800 meters? I mean, Michael Saruni, Emmanuel Career. Yeah, on paper, Texas A&M has the whole, history of 800-meter
Mhm.
development. Yeah, it's a great fit on paper.
Yeah, yeah, I really like it, and I hope this is kind of the next step in a long line of Texas A&M 800-meter runners, obviously with
Yep.
Brazier, Devin Dixon, Brandon Miller. They obviously new coaching staff, but it seems like everything is pointed in the right direction. On the women's side for Texas A&M, they also signed a big hitter in Debora Cherono. comes in with a PR of 4:17 in the 1500 meter. We're not sure about eligibility, but excellent time. And again, just a great fit on paper.
Yeah, great fit on paper, and she really like. I think the selling point is the 4:17 PR over 1500 meters.
Mhm.
If she's able to develop that, she begins to get to like a nice player, potentially national qualifier and things of that nature. But what I think is important is that like she's run sub 20 over 6K according to Texas A&M, which is like okay, so she's a competitive cross country runner, like a really
Mhm.
good one. And Texas A&M women qualified for the national meet this past year as a team. I think the first time in 20 some 30 some years,
23 years. Yep.
23 years. And they lose only one woman from that group. It's Madison Brown, a great scorer, but not like an overwhelming scorer. And I think given what Cherono has done, she comes in there, she's instantly their top scorer. I feel comfortable saying that right now. And all of a sudden, Texas A&M is now maybe a little bit better. Now, Texas A&M also finished 30th with 775 points in the national meet. There is still some work to do, but maybe they add another piece that we're not aware of. The rest of that group develops. I just like the step that they're taking because if Toronto has eligibility and like it's for a couple consecutive years, I
Mhm.
could see a nice little nucleus forming there for Texas A&M. I'm not going to say they're going to be like a top 20 team, but just something to monitor.
I mean, it's the same kind of conversation we had with Kipiego. I think just to a lesser
Yeah.
level of like, hey, you're investing in someone who can help you score points on the track, hopefully, but also is someone that hopefully can continue to improve your cross country team and make that at least give you the option of strengthening that with another piece or two to get you to a really competitive level at nationals. Um, Maybe they don't want to take that step of like allocating more resources to that side. But if she turns out to be really good on the grass, I think she gives them a much more likelihood of going ahead and doing that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, let's move on to the next name. Um, Brian Kweyei? 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 Sorry, I'm trying my best there. Do you want to take a shot?
Kweyei, I think
I like Kweyei.
that's my guess.
I like Kweyei. We'll go Kweyei. To Clemson, and he has a 145 800-meter PR. Oh my gosh. And like I've checked this. He is legit. Like he has like championship experience at the U20 level. I think he's the African U20 champion. I mean, his run under 148, God knows how many times. This dude is legit. He's consistent. He runs consistently fast. I actually don't think he's ever run specifically 146. He's run 145 once and then a bunch of 147s and 148s and so
Yeah.
on. Um, but he's legit. And if his visa is approved and if he is coming over, I I think I would. I don't know if I would like pick him, but I think I would instantly throw him in the national title conversation over 800 meters. I think you'd have to just because it's not just one time. It's championship
Sure.
experience, consistency. I think he has, already shown us a lot of what we like to see. And so again, I still think Busy Mind is like the 800
Yeah.
favorite. This is also assuming that he comes over this winter and spring. Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if I can go title like contender, but I guess I mean I think he's top five probably in the NCAA now, which I think probably puts you in at least some kind of title contention. I don't trust him as much as like Bizimana or Buchabi or even maybe Handel Roban, who just puts it together at NCAA's at the perfect time
Yeah, he
every
does.
championship
Yeah.
season. But I mean, based off of talent alone, he's in that same class. So I think it wouldn't be a stunner to see him right in the mix right away in a national championship.
So if you had to rank the 800-meter guys right now, would you put him fourth in that case?
I think so. I think that the top three, and then maybe I'm forgetting someone, but I think that's the group right there.
I think so. I think right now I would put him in that top four. But the thing with that is that I think those first three guys can all realistically win the national title. I think
Sure,
that's yeah, and I think that's kind of why I say that. Like I think there's a very clear tier list in the men's 800 meters this year. It's before his recruitment. It was Bizimana, Raban, and Buchebe. But I think Kiwe or Kweyei, I think is what we're going with.
yeah,
I think he's definitely part of that top tier. So Clemson obviously has a history of developing top 800-meter runners. They have Tyrese Roden and Amon Thornton. They have like a 221K guy who's a freshman in Blake Slavinsky. He's really good right now. They developed John Lewis. They've developed Cameron Jones. There are guys here who like should in theory, are some of the more naturally talented half milers that we've seen in the NCAA over the last few
yep,
years. I will be curious to see if they can then refine some of the tactical aspects, the surges, when to turn on and turn off certain gears in those late stages of races, and just responding to moves. Obviously, the tactical nuance is arguably, I think, just as important on the track as it is their fitness. Whereas getting cross country, I think your fitness is your fitness kind of thing. Um,
yeah.
so we'll see kind of how that unfolds. But yeah, massive signing. I would argue it's the biggest one yet. Clemson also did add Sylvia Jalego. I don't know how to say that. We have no credentials on her. I can't find a single thing. I tried, couldn't find anything. We're moving on. Our final name here.
She is from the same exact town as Kweyei, which is interesting. I mean, if that's accurate, you obviously we know nothing from a times perspective, but could be indicative that they think she's going to be very, very good, like Kweyei.
Yeah, I mean, if you said like you have to put money on this, yes, she's going to be great, or she's going to be, just whoever.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, I'll put my money on her being really, really good.
right.
Or at least it's fairly good. So, Ben MacMillan, the last name we'll wrap up here with 357 miler, 1351 5K from Scotland. Scotland. He is
Sterling,
heading,
Scotland. Yep.
yeah, he is heading to Washington. I don't know what else more I can say here. It's a match made in heaven. They've done well with UK runners before. Brian Fay most recently. I'm sure there's probably one other name I'm missing here, but it's there. He's a miler. He can move up to the 5K or move up in distance somewhat effectively. I think he's probably not really going to make a contribution in cross country for at least a year or two, depending on how much eligibility he still has. I think he's actually on the older side, so I don't know how much eligibility he'll actually be able to have, but 357 mile fits in well. If he's joining this, oh no, he's joining in the fall of 2024. So let's assume that Hauser and Wascom are gone by that point, but he still gets to grow with Nathan Green, unless Nathan Green has a magical season and goes pro. Which is possible at this rate. I imagine like someone like would be like, hey, we want all three of the Washington guys all at once, and I could see that happening. But just general thoughts on the signing.
Yeah, perfect match. And yeah, from an eligibility perspective, I would imagine he's got at least 2 years. He is 22, so he's a little bit on the older side. But usually these British guys are pretty smart about not running in the championships that would cause them to lose eligibility when they come over to America. He's from an area. One of my old teammates from that same area, so I think he obviously understands what he's coming into. And yeah, I think it's a perfect fit for him. I agree with you. I think he could be like a back end scorer right away, but I think you can't really expect him to be a big time scorer for him for Washington right away. But I do think in 2 years that is a possibility. 1351 5K shows that he does have some aerobic fitness. And I think that could go to another level. Obviously, Coach Powell has done a great job turning 1500-meter guys into contributors on the grass, and I would expect him to do the same thing with MacMillan, just probably in 2025.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's all about the timeline with him. Is I think what we're both on. And he's run what 340, I think, as well for 1500 meters. I want to say so. Like he can be just as effective. We still just have to learn more about him. Like I would love to tell you, like Ben. I would love to ask you the question: what's his ceiling? What can he run? Like, what do you think he'll do?
Yeah.
But like at this point, that's just like It's just a question that it's like, well, I think he could win the national title. Well, it's like, yeah, well, anyone could probably, but
Yeah.
um, okay. Well, I think that's it. Did I miss anyone?
No, I think that's everybody. Really, like we said at the beginning, just some game changing recruits, transfers, whatever you want to call that. Athletes coming into the NCAA who are going to mix things up from the moment they step on the grass, step on the track. So keep these names in the back of your head because they're going to pop up and you might not know who they are unless you've listened to this podcast, unless you've read the article on thestridereport.com. So we're preparing you right before they blow up.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a good podcast, Ben. Thank you for your late night flexibility. I appreciate it. I was able to watch Alabama lose to Michigan just before we kind of got started here, so it worked out well. But that's all I got on my end. Do you have anything on your end?
That's it. Until next week, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.